To answer your question, Dave, no, this is not a real gun sitting on my table. This is.
I still want to know who would have a gun sitting on their computer desk under papers.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how organized you are. You're like, I'll get to putting that gun away eventually.
Wasn't that what led to Jack Palance's downfall in Batman? His gun was on the desk, but like under the lid of his cigar box or something.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
No, I like to think of myself as Christian Slater from True Romance. I'd rather have a gun and not need it than need a gun and not have it. No, the story behind this gun, which I will fire. It has lights on it, by the way. The story behind this gun is that for a bachelor party, my friends took me to one of those laser tag arcade places.
Yeah.
And they thought this gun was really cool, so they pooled all of their tickets from the thing and got me this gun.
How many tickets was it? Do you know?
I don't know.
That's a 1,500 ticket gun.
Yeah, this is
easy.
It's heavy duty. It's definitely was a lot of tickets. It's one of the quote unquote good prizes that they had.
That is a good prize.
But the way that they presented it to me was so funny. It was like my friend took it and she like got down on one knee and like presented it to me like it was like a sword or something.
Nice. I dubbed thee Sir Evan.
Sir Evan guns a lot. I don't know. Welcome to Spoiler Peace Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of the Boston and Online Film Critics Association and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly, Orlando Weekly, and I'm a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
Hi, I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer and critic. I'm an editor of Bitchflix, and I, too, am a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
Proud members. I feel like we should like put our hands in and be like, woo!
Be like, 1, 2, 3, go!
Critique!
Critique on 3.
Good critique out there, team.
You really nailed the mise-en-scene in Motherless Brooklyn.
Why, thank you. I did a kind of half-chair bow. So welcome to this week's show. We've got 3 movies we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about Harriet, the new movie about Harriet Tubman.
That would have been interesting if it was a musical, but anyway.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking about Harriet. We're going to be talking about Motherless Brooklyn, which might have one of the more entertaining titles this year.
Nah.
And Terminator.
Dark Fate.
Yeah. I keep wanting to cut like one of the silly, like To Catch a Thief, like Dark Foat or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I just
Fatey.
I remember when the poster came out and the title was released, Terminator Dark Fate, and I just thought, I guess there really is no fate but what we make. It's like they just made a new Terminator movie and they're just going to make a new timeline and it's going to be A-okay.
And mention no fate but what we make again.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can get into it later, but
yes.
I mean, if you're going to reboot that franchise, the best thing to do is ignore everything that came after it.
True.
After T2, that is.
Correct.
But first, Megan, tell us about Harriet, which you saw.
Yes, I did see Harriet. So I was very excited to see this because this is the first film about Harriet Tubman where she's not just appearing as a secondary tertiary character. And it's directed by Cassie Lemons, who, did the amazing Eve's Bayou. And It's exciting to see a Black woman direct and co-write a film with a Black woman as a lead. And we desperately need more biopics and historical films featuring women of color, particularly Black women. So this was really, really exciting. I have to say I have some reservations to talk about this film because I'm a white woman talking about a film with an almost entirely Black cast about an iconic Black woman in history. Having said that, I want to say that I did enjoy this film, and Cynthia Erivo is absolutely incredible in this role. I have always enjoyed her. I've always thought that she was a scene stealer in everything she's in,
Mm-hmm.
from Widows to Bad Time at the El Royale. I'm always riveted and mesmerized by her. I always feel like she just conveys a tremendous amount of complexity and pathos within a very short amount of time. And she definitely does that here in Harriet, and makes her a very, I think, interesting character because of her performance.
Mm-hmm.
However, as I'll talk about as we get into the film, I didn't quite enjoy it as much as I wish I had, just because, and I should give this caveat that I'm not the biggest fan of biopics in general. I feel it's really hard, for me anyway, to really enjoy them, because I feel like they're often very heavy-handed, very standard, kind of like hit the historical beats.
I'm on your page.
Yeah, that's like ba 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 ba, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and so I like it when a biopic really kind of hones in on a very specific period of time, kind of like Spielberg's Lincoln. I enjoy that much more. And the thing of it is that the smart thing that Kasi Lemmons did was, this does focus on about a 10-year period in Harriet Tubman's life, which is great because it's not covering the whole span of her life, which I really think was a very smart decision. Yeah. And the other thing I really enjoyed about this is it's very epic in scope. It looks very epic in its cinematography. The score, which is kind of forgettable, but it feels very epic, and it kind of swells.
Terrence Blanchard, right?
I found it pretty forgettable. Yeah. Okay. I know, I hate to say that. I do, but, and obviously other people may feel differently, but yeah, that was my take on it. But it just feels very standard. Like, oh, this is a biopic, so we're gonna hit all the swells. We're gonna hit all the emotional
even
marks.
The story beats and the music line up in ways that you're expecting.
Exactly. Aside from one particular scene, and I'll get where there's no score and it's just dialogue, and it's beautiful and heartbreaking. And I wish the film had done more things like that, because there are certain scenes that are just absolutely gorgeous and really well executed. So to get into the kind of plot summary of the film, it's obviously about the life of Harriet Tubman, but it starts off where she is still a slave, and she has married a free black man. And she wants to be freed because she's uncovered this document, which something to the effect of the slave owner who owns her mother and her brothers and sisters basically made an agreement that when her mother turned 45, all of her siblings and herself were going to be freed. And so she goes to a lawyer. And you don't see this in the film. She's talking about this, that she's gone to a lawyer to bring this document to see if it's valid and to see if she can be freed. So she goes with her husband to the slave owner and says, hey, this is the document. We went to a lawyer, and he basically just tears it up and is like, fuck you. You're my slave. Forget it. So she,
Jesus. So
then she decides, okay, I've had enough of this shit. I'm going to get the fuck out of here. And so after the slave owner dies, his wife and his son, who actually is not called Harriet yet because Harriet Tubman is her freedom name. Her name is Minty before that. She decides, I'm getting out of here. So she runs, and it's this, kind of chase. And the interesting thing is that the film is very much an action film, which I wouldn't have expected beforehand to think. Like, I mean, on the posters, like, you see Harriet Tubman with guns.
Yeah, with like a pistol in her hand, looking like she's ready to shoot somebody.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, I was waiting in line for the Coolidge's 12-hour horror marathon, and there were some dudes behind me who were like, what the fuck is Harriet Tubman doing with a gun? Like, she wasn't any soldier. And the guy next to him was like, I actually think she did have a gun in real life, and she did. So that is actually, the film is actually very accurate. But we'll get to the guns in a moment. So,
ooh, now I'm getting excited.
I know.
Guns.
Yeah. So it's very kind of tense and great actiony that she's running, and there are, the slave owner's son is after her, and there's a black man who he's hired who he also hunts down slaves, even though he's a black man, and he's on her tail. And so basically she's running to freedom 100 miles from Maryland to Pennsylvania, and she's doing it all alone. And she doesn't have she doesn't have a map. She doesn't obviously have a company. Like,
no underground railroad.
No underground railroad to help her. She has nothing. And there's this beautiful scene where a white man has carted her part of the way, and he's like, this is the Pennsylvania border. And there's this really beautiful scene where the camera like spins around her and the sun is coming up and she's like holding up her hands like she's like as if she was going to take a photograph. And it's this really kind of beautiful shot, and it feels very epic in scope, and it works. It's a good scene. So she goes to Pennsylvania, and then she meets up with not the Underground Railroad, but the guy who, Leslie Odom Jr.
Yeah.
He is a part of the Underground Railroad, but I think it's the Anti-Racist Society or something like that. And and she goes to and she stays with Janelle Monáe, who is a rich black woman who owns this massive house. And Janelle Monáe is like, yes, I am a woman and I am a Negro, and yes, and I own this house, and which is kind of amazing. And then she tells Harriet, like, oh, you should take a bath because you smell. And this reminds me very much, Dave, of our conversation about scent in Parasite, because then Harriet turns around and says to her, she's like, you were born free, right? And she was like, yeah. She's like, you were born free. You've never had the stink of fear on you. You've never had to run for your life. And it's kind of interesting, like, again, bringing in scent and smell into a film where you obviously can't smell. So then after she's been living in Philadelphia for a year, she's like, I want to go the fuck back and get my family because they're still enslaved. So she decides to do that, even though Leslie Odom Jr. is like, we don't have enough resources. We can't help you. You can't do this on your own. And she's like, you know, you can't tell me what to do. You don't know me. I made it here by myself. And he's like, oh, it was a fluke. And she's like, no, it's not. I've got God on my side. And that's the other thing I failed to mention, is that she has conversations with God, and we see these flashbacks. And that's a big reason why, for me, the film didn't work. Not because she's having conversations with God, which is very Joan of Arc. And it's hinted at that it's very Joan of Arc. But then later in the film, it explicitly tells you, oh, hey, this is like Joan of Arc, where the slave owner wife says, we need to burn her at the stake like Joan of Arc. And I'm like, really? Couldn't you just... do you need to handhold your audience and tell them, like, can't you just assume that people would get the imagery and the parallel? So
in this day and age,
fair enough. So she decides, so she's having these conversations with God, and she's having these flashbacks, and she has these like spells where she'll like pass out, and she attributes her success to her conversations with God. And so she's like, I've got God on my side. I did it by myself. I can do it again. And so the movie follows her. She keeps going back to get more and more of her family members. She goes back the first time, and she reunites with her husband because he couldn't go with her because she had to just up and leave. And it's this really tender scene. And this is the scene where there's no score, which I think was such a smart move. And
Sounds like it.
Yeah, it really was. And then you find out he married somebody else.
what?
Yeah.
Whoa.
And
That's
Hey,
rough.
bigamy?
right? And he's like, I thought you were dead. And she's like, but I sent word that I was okay, because there's like a network to like let people know, you know, pass messages, if you will.
Guess that message didn't get delivered.
So it's this really heartbreaking scene, and he's like trying to like hug her, and she's like, you know, don't touch me. And she's all upset and pissed, and she's like, you never loved me. And he's like, I would have died for you if you would have let me. And it's just
Interesting line.
Right? Very interesting. But it's a very heartbreaking scene, because you really feel like you kind of understand why he remarried, but also I kind of don't. And like, it's so heartbreaking that she's like going back for him.
Yeah.
And
He's like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, he's like, I'm all set. So yeah.
He's like, you really didn't have to come all the way down here.
Yeah. So she decides to get other family members, and which she does, and and then she goes back to Philadelphia. And before she goes back to Philadelphia with her family, not all of her family, like I think her sister is still left behind because her sister won't leave her kids. But it's a lot of, and it's not her parents, because her parents won't leave until all the kids are out too. So she's gotten all of her siblings except for one of her sisters, and like there's some other people like along the way that are like, wait, I want to come with you. And so she takes like,
she's like, come on then.
Yeah. And so
We'll form a railroad.
Right. So she takes this group of people back to Philadelphia, and then she like kind of shows up at Leslie Odom Jr.'s like, you know, building, and like, you know, here, like kind of like, and she doesn't say anything, but it's basically like, you know, you told me I couldn't do this, and here you go. I have all these people.
Dropping off.
Exactly. Yeah, dropping off. Now I'm going out again. So then she decides she's going to go back again and to get more of her family. And it keeps going back and forth like this. And he basically introduces her to Underground Railroad people, and she officially becomes a part. And then she keeps just going back and forth, getting slaves out. And she she has like a hat and she's dressed like a man and she has a gun. And that is actually true that Harriet Tubman did carry guns on all of her missions when she would go back to get slaves out. And the interesting thing is that, and I do really like that Kasi Lemmons had this in the film too, the wanted posters for the person getting out the slaves, they assume it's a man, and they also assume it's a white man in blackface, as if no black person could ever revolt or rebel or anything. Yeah, it's
talk
ridiculous.
About some magical thinking there.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So she keeps going back and forth, and there's action with guns and everything, and then the Fugitive Slave Act is passed, and so she has to flee to Canada, and it jumps ahead, like it basically, like, so then she goes back to the States to kind of rally people because the Underground Railroad is kind of like, it's too dangerous, and she's like, she gives this really like rousing speech, like, you know, we need to do this, and slavery's a monster, and, you know, and I don't care how hard it is, we need to get people out, you guys have all become too comfortable, you know, you either were born free or you've forgotten what it's like to be enslaved. And so then you see this confrontation, which I felt personally unnecessary, with her old slave owner, the slave owner's son, and they have this like confrontation, and she gives this long speech where she's like, God had never meant for people to own people, and she could kill him, but she doesn't, and she lets him live. And then she leaves, and then it jumps ahead a bit more, and it's during the Civil War, and it's the I believe it's the Combahee River raid, where she is I believe the first woman to lead a military expedition, where she leads this charge to free slaves during the Civil War, and she frees, like, I can't remember the number, but I think it's like 70, or maybe it's more than that. Might be way more than that. But anyway, so that's pretty much where the film ends. Is
the victory of the battle.
Correct.
We freed a ton of people.
Yes.
And good job, me.
Yay!
This is a good time to sign off.
Exactly. And so then there's a coda talking about all the other things she did, like how she was a suffragette and how she was a spy for the Union, and like all of her other amazing
exploits.
Yes, all of her other amazing accomplishments. So I like that the film focuses on a relatively short period of her life. I like that it doesn't span the whole thing. I really like some of the scenes. The acting is great. The scenes with her and Janelle Monáe are great. There's this wonderful scene where after she finds out that her husband's been remarried, she says she's like lamenting and depressed, and, you know, to Janelle Monáe, and Janelle Monáe is like, Harriet, you are so far beyond any man. You don't need, like, basically, like, you don't need any man. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're amazing. And it's great to see that kind of camaraderie on screen, and, you know, kind of like you don't need anybody. You can do this yourself. And there's so much in the film, and like I said, they didn't even cover many other things, but it's great because so many depictions of Harriet Tubman portray her as this kind of grandmotherly type, very kind of nurturing and quiet, and that's not who she was.
No.
And as one of the historians who's a Harriet Tubman historian and was also an advisor of the film said, he really loved that Kasi Lemmons made her this radical militant, but she still had this love of her family, and that's really who she was. And the other thing that's interesting is, in an interview, Kasi Lemmons said that Harriet Tubman has been defanged, and because nobody wants to see a black woman with a gun because it's a very threatening image. And I thought that was a really fascinating comment too, and I love that we do see Harriet Tubman as she was, and this film very much humanizes her. The one other thing I will say, kind of the scandalous piece.
I was wondering. I was just about to ask you, like, what's the slightly controversial element here?
It's a very controversial element for a lot of people, is that Cynthia Erivo is not an African American woman. She is a British Nigerian woman. So that's, I guess, some people had a problem with that. But the bigger problem,
it's acting.
It is, but the bigger problem is that in addition to that, she's apparently made some very disparaging comments about African Americans and particularly African American vernacular. So because of that some people have had a very big problem with her, because they're like, she's disparaging African American language and she's disparaging African Americans, and yet here she is portraying one of the most, if not the most famous African American. So I don't feel, not that I can't have an opinion on this, but I feel like I can't accurately weigh in because I am white. And not that other people can't have opinions on this, of course, but I'm just like, okay, I understand the concerns. I still think she gave an incredible performance. I thought it was very layered and nuanced and tender while being very fierce. So, but whether you agree or support her being in that role or not, I really hope that this film spurs people to learn much more about Harriet Tubman because she's fascinating.
Yeah.
She's so interesting. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, you spoiler pieced me into it. I mean, I was going to see it anyway.
Yeah. It seems like one of the movies to see before the end of the year, before we all vote.
For totes.
Yes.
So I guess that takes us to Motherless Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Which is what?
Surprising. Surprising. It is not a sequel to Fatherless Queens. So I was really expecting that. But
no.
You
were disappointed.
I was.
Yeah, I saw a funny thing on Twitter where somebody was just like rattling off other titles. One was like Childless Bronx or something was one of them.
Yeah.
I prefer Child Free.
Child Free, yeah.
Child Free. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so you guys both saw Motherless Brooklyn.
Yes,
which
we did.
Is written
saw
and directed.
The shit out of all 2 hours and 24 minutes of it.
Ooh. Can't tell if that means you liked it. I'm going to say probably not.
I think this is a good idea in search of a better director. That is how I would put it.
Ed Norton has really only directed, a couple of movies, right?
I thought just one of them.
I don't know.
Keeping the Faith is the other one that he directed, I think.
Oh, yeah, maybe it was
Did
two
he
other
direct
ones.
that?
I think so.
I thought he did.
Oh, my God.
I like Keeping the Faith. I mean... Like,
is that Jenna Elfman and
That is,
and
Ben Stiller, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that might be.
I think you're right. I don't know.
Anyway, I'm not talking about this. You guys are talking about this. So tell me about this movie, which may or may not be competently directed.
Do you want me to talk about it while you look up Keeping the Faith?
He directed Keeping the Faith. It is confirmed.
Confirmed. Excellent.
No, I just I think I'll just weigh in quickly, and then you can kind of take the bulk of this because I get the feeling you might have liked it more. Maybe I don't know. It is there are some. I don't know how to pronounce the author's name, even though I did watch his TV show on HBO.
Oh, Jonathan
Latham, whatever.
Yeah.
I've read a couple of his books. I haven't read this one.
I've not either.
I read The Disappointment Artist, which I think is just a bunch of essays, and I read, one of his novels. And anyway, I think that I'm not going to read him anymore because he's kind of an idiosyncratic kind of writer that you're either on board with that style. It's kind of like if you think about Bret Easton Ellis, for better or worse, only one person writes like.
I'm like, oh.
Well, but here, well, I'm going somewhere with this.
For worse.
But you read him, and there's nobody else that could possibly be. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Very distinctive.
And I kind of feel
writing,
that way about Jonathan Latham.
Okay.
And so, and I'm not comparing his writing style or anything to Bret Easton Ellis.
No.
Don't get me wrong.
Just the distinctive.
Yeah,
nature.
yeah. So anyway, the whole time, and I shouldn't be thinking this during the movie. It's like, why does he have Tourette's? Why? Why?
So
why
Ed
does
Norton
his character
can be
have
nominated for an Oscar?
Why does his character have Tourette's? There's no reason for this character to have this condition.
Right.
No story reason.
No, and I know I say that as the character I'm assuming has it in the book as well, but it really...
I'm assuming too.
I just feel like Ed Norton plays roles with neurodevelopmental disorders or mental illness in order to potentially garner awards. Maybe not. Maybe I'm being too jaded and cynical.
He's trolling for awards.
Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, I mean, see, the interesting thing is I actually... I don't want to say liked that he had Tourette's, but it's something you don't always see depicted on screen, and you usually
it's usually in comedies as a laugh.
Which
but
is
a lot
appalling.
of it was used for laughs in this.
Correct.
And some of it was genuinely funny, like the whole thing with him lighting that woman's cigarette, but then blowing out the match.
Funny.
That was really funny.
Yeah,
so,
but this is. I guess what I mean is this is a neo noir. This is not a comedy.
Right.
So you usually don't see someone with a
complete with voiceover.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, very noirish. But yeah, I guess I don't want to say. glad is the right word. But I like whenever we see a diverse range of people being portrayed on screen. I always feel kind of, and I know people feel differently about this, but I always feel kind of uncomfortable when there's a person with a disability on screen played by an able-bodied person or person with who's a non-disabled actor. It always just makes me a little skeeved out. But you can make the argument, they're acting, which I know, Evan, you said earlier about Cynthia Erivo, and that's a fair...
Well, that was before I knew that she said disparaging things about the group of people she was playing.
Right, but I mean, it is an argument that a lot of people make, and so, but I'm always uncomfortable because there could be a person with a disability who could portray that role. But anyway, we should probably talk about what the movie is about.
Yeah, well, here we go. Set against the backdrop of 1950s New York, Motherless Brooklyn follows Lionel Esrog, which you only hear his name like once, and you have to remember that his name's Lionel.
Yeah, and it's an important point at one point that the letter of his first name is L, and I completely forgot who they were talking about.
Yeah. Where am I? A lonely private detective afflicted with Tourette syndrome as he ventures to solve the murder of his mentor and only friend, Frank Minna, who is played by Bruce Willis, whose name is very prominent in the credits, despite being in the movie for maybe 11 minutes.
Yeah, that's generous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that seems to be Bruce Willis a lot lately.
Yeah.
He just shows up in things briefly and then goes back to making directed, on-demand movies.
And he's un-Bruce Willis-like in this part, I would say, which I think is... probably because it's a supporting part. He doesn't have to rely on the smarm. But that's kind of the bare bones thing. What this movie is really, the thing that also irked me is this movie takes as one of its antagonists, and I think it's fair that he would be an antagonist. The Alec Baldwin character, whose name is Moses Rudolph or Rudolph Moses.
Yeah.
Rudolph Moses, I think that's it. But the story basically lifts as its antagonist this Alec Baldwin character who is clearly modeled on Robert Moses, who is the guy who built many of the bridges in the Triborough Bridge, which I think they renamed the Robert F. Kennedy Bridge or something like that. I haven't lived in New York in a while. But he built a bunch of parks, and he's the one who tore the Bronx in half to build the Cross Bronx Expressway, and he did do these things like in the movie, have everybody evicted, and claim that these neighborhoods were slums when it's just where poor people live.
Yeah,
which is
urban
a quote
redevelopment
in the film, yeah,
which is right out of the movie, and
I mean that feels very appropriate for a villain of a noir.
It does, and you may feel differently, Dave, but this actually worked for me. I thought it was really interesting to make an analog of Donald Trump in this film. And,
I mean, I got that, but at the same time, I was just stuck on the comparing it to The Power Broker the entire time because I had to read The Power Broker in grad school, so I'm just thinking, all right, did Moses really do that? Because it is it's him. I mean, it's totally bizarre how it's just basically they changed his name.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. But again, and that's so funny because I did not read The Power Broker, but all I could think of was Donald Trump, right down to racist housing issues and talking about getting it done repeatedly throughout the film, and his disdain for progressives, and right down to him being a rapist. Literally every possible thing you could think about Donald Trump is Alec Baldwin's character.
Right.
And so, yeah.
And also, I didn't love Alec Baldwin's portrayal. He's so Alec Baldwin-y most of the time.
I was just going to say, I mean, is he ever not?
And he was in this. Well, you know what movie that he was really good in recently was, it's the Julianne Moore movie where she has early onset Alzheimer's, Still Alice.
Yes.
He was really great as her husband in that.
Yes, he was.
And he was very unlike what he usually does. And he's been great in some things, and
and not great in
others. And I just kind of felt like he kind of slipped into archetype role, rich asshole, smoke cigarettes. You know,
there's no depth. There's no.
I mean, in this particular, in noir, sometimes you don't need an antagonist who's got reasons beyond fuck him.
Yeah,
sure, but at the same time, I mean, and very true. And again, you can be, it's always interesting to see someone obsessed with power, for better or for worse. But again, I'm still yearning for something deeper, something more, rather than, I mean, because again, you could have a very singular focus, but you can still be a really riveting compelling character, which I did not feel him to be at all.
Totes agree.
Mm-hmm. I feel like the thing too in a lot of noir is the villain is someone who comes in disguise. They're not someone that you think is necessarily like you in the audience might know they're the villain, but people in the world that they live in think of them as possibly a benevolent figure or someone who's kind of like, like a really respected businessman or politician or somebody who appears on the up and up to general society. And this guy just sounds pretty much like a straight up villain.
Yeah,
he doesn't seem like he has like a veneer of like legitimacy. No, if I'm understanding that correctly.
You are understanding it 100% correctly. What's interesting though is that because Ed Norton's character asks this question of Willem Dafoe, who you find out is his brother, like, why do people like him? Because apparently everyone in government and outside of government really loves him. And he's like, oh, it's because he's making the parks. He's, bringing the people to the parks. But the way he's introduced in the film is like you don't even see his face for such a long period of time
until he's signing the document,
right?
And you see him in profile,
right? Exactly. But it's a really
there's some unusual
right. I was just gonna say
some unusual camera choices in this,
right? Because it's like trying to convey his power and his mysteriousness. But no, you see he's a douche straight up right away.
Right. Yeah.
There is no veneer. There is no hiding it. There is no like, oh, well, maybe he really is benevolent or he's doing, kind of these Machiavellian things, for benevolent purposes. Like, no, he is a straight up racist asshole who's obsessed with power. And that's it. As far as performances, I did enjoy. I love Gugu Mbatha-Raw in this always. Michael K. Williams is amazing.
He is really good.
God, I love that man.
Yeah, he's
so
great.
much. He is wonderful, and he plays a jazz musician. And
who played her father, or I guess technically her
Bunny
uncle?
From The Wire.
Bunny from The Wire.
Yes,
exactly. I can't remember his name.
Nope,
but he's
I never know
great.
his name, but he is always a delight in everything. And I was so excited to see not one but two Wire people. So I love it. But speaking of being a musician, I wanted to talk about the score and the soundtrack because Dave, I don't know.
I don't remember much about it.
Interesting.
Was it a jazz soundtrack?
Horns by Flea?
Yes. So, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So it is a jazz score, but also, yes, Tom York wrote the song. Now I can't remember the name.
Daily Battles.
Thank you, Daily Battles. And he sings it, and it is in the film, and not just like at the end credits, and Flea does the horns. And then Wynton Marsalis rearranged the song and made it instrumental, and also performs on the song with other people as well. And that's the song that Michael K. Williams plays at the jazz club. And it's an interesting choice to let the song play out in its entirety. And like, I've had that song stuck in my head in the best possible way. I loved the score. I love that song, both iterations of it. So, yeah, I would say the performances by Gugu Mbatha-Raw and Michael K. Williams and the score and soundtrack were my favorite parts of the film.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I don't remember the score well enough to have an opinion on it.
Which might not be a good sign.
Yeah.
Perhaps not.
Right.
I did appreciate it when Michael K. Williams hit that guy over the head with his trumpet.
Yes.
I like it.
That was good. I liked that, too.
But, the movie kind of centers on, it's about, removing poor people from their neighborhoods so they can put in I can't remember if it's a park or a highway.
A highway.
Is it the Cross Bronx that they're doing? Or
that might be.
That might be it.
Yeah.
I think that is it.
That would make sense.
But
not that they ever say it, but that would make sense.
Right.
Or maybe they do.
It's also about Gugu and who her parents are, really, is what it ends up being about. And you find out that her father is Alec Baldwin's character, and he raped her mother, and she never knew her mother. And then, Edward Norton finds this out because that's what the mystery is.
That's like classic noir, though.
Yeah.
Like secret children and like people in power.
Oh, sure. But then it's just he sort of uses it. The ending gets murky because it's like they keep talking about this big vote that everybody is going to have, that they're going to that the city's going to have about the highway, and how one of Alec Baldwin's flunkies has bought a corporation, or has bought 50% of a corporation or whatever that'll be doing a lot of construction work. Like, they want to bid on it, so he's going to be like earning a shitload of money on the side, and it's going to he's going to amass power. And so you keep thinking about this climactic vote, which never happens.
Never.
Edward Norton just goes out to the beach, to this house he's inherited from Bruce Willis, and which I think is on the end of Long Island, maybe. I don't know where it's supposed to
Could be, yeah.
And they're just watching the sunrise, and he's very Ed Norton-y. I mean, the thing about this also is like Edward Norton is like he's just so Edward Norton, you know. I used to think that he was like a great actor, but he really just does the one thing, you know, except for maybe the movie where he played the guy with the two personalities, but it turns out he actually had one personality.
Primal Fear.
I was like Fight Club.
That too. Oh my God. That too.
But it just felt like, you know, when you're trying to stuff all the pieces together in a noir, it really, you know, don't spell it out to me, man. I mean,
and that's my problem with it too.
Like everything in this movie is spelled out to the T, except for the vote, which story-wise actually doesn't really matter.
No.
But they make such a big deal about it. You keep thinking, well, at least we're going to see it. Nah.
Nope.
You know? So, yeah, it's just like everything is explained and explained and explained. He explains that he has Tourette's without calling it Tourette's. I think I counted 4 times. You know, he's like, I got this thing for my head where I just say things, and it's like...
Yeah, and he also talks about having glass in his brain, but he says it, again, multiple times.
Yeah, and it's just like, come on, man.
And
fuck.
I don't know if you felt this way, too, but the scene where he's getting high because it, like, calms down his Tourette's, and he's, like, falling into the water, and then we see him, like, falling underwater.
Oh, I thought he was going to the sunken place.
That's funny, but that's not the reference I got. I was like, this looks like a straight ripoff of Lynn Ramsey's You Were Never Really Here.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that.
Right?
Yeah.
I was like, that looks exactly like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Motherless Brooklyn refers to his character. That's what Bruce Willis called him.
Oh, yeah, because he was an orphan.
He was an orphan at a
the
Brooklyn orphanage, and Bruce Willis would be like, you're from Brooklyn. You're Motherless Brooklyn or whatever.
I see.
Other thing that irked me was we've started to cast Bobby Cannavale in this role.
I love Bobby Cannavale.
And I love him. I love him. And he's great in this role. But the moment he showed up on screen,
you know what's going to happen.
I know.
Like,
I was like,
he's a shady
he's
douche.
going to fucking double-cross Edward Norton, which he does in a very mild-mannered sort of way.
I know.
But
it's very weird.
But still, it's just like, you know, when you're casting so on the nose that I know it's going to happen, you've really fucked up. You know? It's just like... You should have had the other guy who looks like Mike Birbiglia do the Bobby Cannavale role.
The guy from The Walking Dead. Yeah. Whose name I can't remember.
Oh, is it the guy who plays Eugene on The Walking Dead?
No. It's the other guy. It's the guy who used to work with the governor.
Yeah.
And who is there with Andrea.
Yes. Yep. I know the guy you're talking about.
Who's really good in his part, by the way. But...
Yes. His name's not here on my cheat sheet anyway.
and just I would have liked to see more Goo Goo just because I always want to see more Goo Goo.
Well, so that's fine. I'm glad you said that because I always want to see more Goo Goo, obviously. But I really would have, and I know it's a noir, so it's supposed to be from a private detective, or not necessarily, but it's going from the private investigator's perspective. But I actually really would have liked if more of the film had been from her perspective. Like that would have been more interesting. Maybe just because she's a better actor and she's more interesting by default.
When I say Edward Norton is Edward Norton-y, what I mean is just like he really has fallen into a pattern of just kind of doing this, and he has such a particular way of speaking, which he never alters. You know, it's irritating to me.
I think in Primal Fear was the last time I ever saw him deviate from his typical way of speaking. He speaks very differently in that. Yeah. But that's it. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I think there are plenty of actors that are very revered in filmic circles and in, by awards that literally are playing the same exact character over and over and over.
Yeah. Let's start with Brad Pitt. I mean, every time I see Brad Pitt on screen, it's Brad Pitt playing Brad Pitt.
That's how I feel about Jack Nicholson. And don't get me wrong, Jack Nicholson is a great actor, but I feel like now that's basically what he's doing, is playing himself.
So to bring it around, would you guys say...
Thanks, Evan.
Would you guys say see or not? See it or not?
I would say you don't need to see it in the theater.
Sounds like meh-less Brooklyn.
Ding ding. I would say you don't need to see it in the theater. I would say you could wait to see it on streaming.
Yeah,
possibly.
I agree.
Because I think there are good elements. I did like that we're talking about racial discrimination and and classism and all of those things. And noir isn't a good genre, but at the same time, there's so many kind of formulaic things and over explaining of things, and
you just kind of see where it's going.
I think you see where it's going in the first 15 minutes.
Maybe even earlier? Took me longer to figure that out, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just like once I kind of was like, oh, I think I know where this is going, and then the rest of the movie is like, okay, I'm right. Okay, I'm right. Okay, I'm right. It's just kind of like you get bored,
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think there is a better film in here, but I don't think it's a bad film. I think
it's not bad.
There's good elements.
Yeah, not the screenplay.
But yeah.
All right.
Anyway.
Why don't we talk about Terminator Dark Fate?
Ooh, okay.
Sure. Okay.
I feel like I've been waiting to talk about that.
I know you've probably been itching.
I liked it. I was not expecting to like it. I mean, I haven't liked a Terminator movie in a very long time.
Since 1991, maybe?
Yeah. Right? I mean, so when 3 came out, I kind of liked it. But the more
okay.
But the more I think about it, the more I'm like, okay, this is just bad. It's a bad movie.
Well, no, correction. The action sequence with that weird truck that has that's so big that
that's like smashing through the buildings. Yeah, that was the one.
That's kind of fun. Everything else is kind of
thinking back on it. That was the one memorable scene that kind of sticks out in my mind. I don't remember a fucking thing about Salvation, and Genesis was terrible.
I think
is Arnold in Genesis?
Yes,
he is. I think T3 is unwatchable. I think Salvation is unwatchable, and I think Genesis is almost pretty much unwatchable too, unfortunately.
So Terminator Dark Fate, I liked it. I think it's good. I think it's obviously
I enjoyed it too.
The best Terminator since T2 for sure.
Oh, 100%. I think it's definitely worth seeing. Absolutely.
It's a lot of fun.
I think it's worth seeing for Linda Hamilton alone.
Yes.
I mean, Linda Hamilton is amazing. And
is she a smoker?
Yes.
Okay, because her voice, man.
She smokes all throughout T2. She's like a chain smoker.
She drops a lot of F-bombs, which I really like.
Yes,
she says fuck a lot.
She does. So
Oh yeah, it's a hard R, ladies and gentlemen.
It is. Thank God. As it should be. So,
I was actually. I thought for some reason it was a PG-13 going in.
No, and I'm glad it wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have to say right out of the gate that, and I know Evan, I said this to you and Shauna right after the film ended. The problem with the sequels, except for Genesis, which I'm going to say in a moment, the problem with the sequels is that they thought that they needed John Connor to continue the series, and they don't. They needed Sarah Connor, and they needed Linda Hamilton as Sarah Connor, not Amelia Clarke or anyone else.
Right.
And
Amelia Clarke played Sarah Connor?
Yes.
Yeah, in Genesis.
Yeah, in Genesis.
It was so bad. It was so bad.
It was so bad. But
I would have gone with Felicity Jones, man. Jeez.
She's terrible too.
Yeah, she's
but anyway,
terrible too.
I have to finish what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, she is terrible. I love Amelia Clarke, but that's a whole other conversation. But she's terrible as Sarah Connor. Anyway, so the thing of it is you need Sarah Connor because the story is not about John Connor. It's not about him being a hacker. It's not about him being the Messiah. It's not about Arnold discovering his humanity as a machine, although that's a nice side plot. Compelling. It's about Sarah Connor. It's about her having to live with the weight of knowing that the world is going to be fucking destroyed, and what do you do with that?
Right.
And how she survives and how she is strategic, and and her resilience, and that's what the film is about. And also her dealing with her, trauma and PTSD, and the thing of it is I love that we get to see her, and it's also a really intriguing concept. Who is Sarah Connor without John? Who is she once he's dead? And, how does she function? And
after she's lived in the world for a while, because like in T2, she's been in the mental hospital and they've been abusive to her, and everyone's made her question herself and her sanity.
Exactly.
And like, where is she X number of years later when she's had a chance to really live in it and process it, and even at this point see the fact that Judgment Day didn't come according to schedule.
Exactly. And it's really interesting because throughout the film, she says like, I saved 3 billion lives. You're welcome. And she's talking about this and like, oh, I guess I'll let somebody else be Mary, and really leaning into the Christ Mary symbolism that was, in Terminator and T2. And I have to say also, it's so great to see a woman in her 60s shooting guns in an action-packed role. And it reminds me of when Jamie Lee Curtis came back to do Halloween, and it broke all kinds of records, for the highest grossing horror film, the highest grossing film for, a woman, an older woman as the lead. And I hope this does this too, because Linda Hamilton, is, I don't know if she's a great actor in everything, but I think as Sarah Connor in the Terminator franchise,
she knows it.
She knows it. She knows this role inside and out. She is phenomenal. And for that alone, I think this is worth seeing. And there's so many other good things about it too.
Yeah, agreed. It's very action-packed in the beginning in a good way, where it kind of feels like it's like boom, 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 lots of action and chases and things that like are good.
It's reminiscent of T2 that way.
A lot of the things are very reminiscent.
I didn't love the
which
part,
is a problem.
Actually, let's talk about the plot for a second.
Oh, yes.
So the story centers on Sarah Connor and Mackenzie Davis, who is half person, half cyborg,
She's an
I
enhanced
guess.
human, as
She's
she puts it.
an enhanced human, and Mackenzie Davis has come back in time to take care of Natalia Reyes. What's her character's name? Danny. Who we don't know why Mackenzie Davis is there to protect her, but
I knew why.
we know that she's important to the future in some way.
We also don't know that Mackenzie Davis we don't know that she's not a Terminator at first. Which is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, when she puts her foot underneath that guy, I was like, "Ooh, is he gonna get like the fist through the heart?"
Yeah,
like Bill Paxton did.
And that I was gonna say. So I didn't love the scene when Mackenzie Davis shows up. Strictly from the perspective of she's obviously, she comes through the time portal, whatever. She's naked, and these two people help her, and then the cops come, and she fucking just dismantles the cops that are there, and it just bugs the shit out of me in action movies when it's just not well shot. Like when the hand-to-hand fighting, you just can't tell what's going on. It's shot at a weird angle. It's edited in a weird way.
It's
night. Dark. I want to see my action.
Correct.
I'm weirdly un-American in that way. I don't love shaky cam, and I don't love the crazy cutting in mid, punch or whatever that we like to do in America with our action movies.
Well, I also don't like when the camera's way too close, because the same thing, you can't see anything. Right. I like it when it's a long shot. I want to see everything.
Right.
Yeah.
But that kind of sets a chain of action in motion where she's going to, track down Danny, and she, the other Terminator guy shows up, and he's there.
Is it
and
Gabriel Luna or Gabriel Luna?
Yes. And they have that
beautiful, by the way. I was like looking at him like he is a fine looking man.
He is very very suave. You could see how he could put the moves on somebody.
Yeah. Could like fool you into thinking he's not the Terminator.
Right. Well, he also talks very differently than other Terminators. And
he takes different accents and he speaks many, I'm sure all Terminators speak many languages.
Right.
But
But not only, I didn't only just mean that, but I also meant he seems to have like this kind of,
he doesn't have a robotic
charm.
cadence.
Right. Exactly. He
speech.
seems much more human.
Right. He's not like Arnold saying things like, affirmative and some bullshit like that. Sorry, I was channeling John Connor there for a minute.
And he's even more human than Robert Patrick, I would say. Because Robert Patrick still did the thing where he'd turn his head before he turned the rest of his body, if you remember that.
He's got a little bit of the Robert Patrick run, though, where he sticks his hands out stiffly.
I love that.
That's because he's got the stabbing weapons.
Yeah.
I love
it.
Okay,
so that's a part I want to cover, and I feel like that the mythology in this is a little fucking weird. So the idea is that in this one... So the idea that they've argued in multiple Terminator movies is, regardless of whether Skynet actually comes to fruition, somehow humanity is going to invent AI that will come back and destroy it. And in this case, Skynet was never created, but a different system called Legion, which is, I think, a stupid name.
Oh, terrible.
Stupid.
It sounds like a villain name. It doesn't sound like a defense system name.
No.
It sounds like The Exorcist.
And so Legion created its own Terminators, and this is what's come back. And so the bad guy in this is what they call a Rev 9, which he seems to embody some of the characteristics of previous Terminators. He does have the kind of like liquid metal, but he's more made of nanobots. So he's got nanobots, and he's got his like endoskeleton, and you can separate the nanobot part from the endoskeleton, and they can operate independently, which I think is super cool.
That was super cool.
And it used very effectively in many scenes where he kind of like splits off, and the two parts are doing the fighting. But what I don't love is the idea of the knives and stabbing weapons, which you're talking about.
Oh, why not?
Just because. So in T2, the whole idea was he's like, okay, he can't mimic complex machinery. He can only do knives and stabbing weapons. And in this, the guy makes a gun and then shoots the gun with his body. And I'm like, okay, that's fine if they somehow made an advance that they could do that. But
they never explained that.
Yeah, how could that have happened?
Well, they also never explained how he could split his endoskeleton from his nanobot part. But, you just accept it over time.
Yeah.
They also don't explain, again, why there's still no technology for time travel where they can wear clothes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, it's like you can't take organic material, but you can take inorganic material surrounded by organic material. Okay, that doesn't make sense.
Right, but it just seems even weirder here because it's not even the same technology. It's not even the same company. So it just seems like there should be more differences. I will say, speaking of time travel, though, there is a strange dearth in the sci-fi genre of women time travelers. So I'm very excited Mackenzie Davis got to time travel. Just saying. Just a side.
The only other thing I've seen her in is Tully. So
God, she's amazing in Always Shine.
Okay.
Sophia Takal, who is going to be did direct Black Christmas that comes out in December or November. She did Always Shine, and it's phenomenal. It's an incredible film.
Okay. I have another
Mackenzie Davis is great in it.
I have another Mackenzie Davis recommendation. The
Halt
show
and Catch Fire?
Halt and Catch Fire.
I've wanted to watch that and I've just never gotten around.
It's so good. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. It's so well done.
Okay.
I love Mackenzie Davis. I don't necessarily love her in this. I mean, she's fine.
Yeah. Well, she's doesn't have a lot to do.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
she's got to play the I'm gonna hit you, get out of my way character, which I feel like there's only so much you can do with that.
Yes, but even in the tenderer moments with Danny, I still feel like I don't know, there could have been more. But I do love her overall. She's not bad in this. I just wanted more because I've seen her be better in other things.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
she's still good.
The other thing that's kind of funny is she's so much taller than Natalia Reyes and Linda Hamilton that it's awkward sometimes because she's got to be almost 6 feet tall.
Mm-hmm. Linda Hamilton's very short. She's like 5'3", 5'2",
and it's like Jesus Christ, this woman is so much taller, and I just couldn't not notice that whenever there was a wide shot of the three of them. But what I wanted to get to was, and you said, oh, did you really know? Yes, from the moment Danny shows up, she's running the show. If you notice, she's getting breakfast for her dad and her brother. True. She's making sure her brother gets to work. When her brother is, going to be basically laid off because he's been replaced by a machine.
That's true.
She
decisive,
goes to talk to his boss and be like, no, man, and you're going to fire 3,000 people.
Right.
And so I was just like, all right, she's not going to give birth to the resistance. She's the leader.
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's what's so interesting is that Sarah Connor immediately assumes that she's being protected because not just her role in the future, but that she's going to give birth. And she says, it's because of your womb. And she makes this assumption.
Super heavy-handed, by the way.
Super. I agree.
Right.
And she also makes the assumption that it's going to be a son that she gives birth to. Hello, super sexist, which is surprising coming from Sarah Connor. But anyway, so it is great that the savior of humanity is a Latina woman. Like, I'm fucking ecstatic about that.
I loved that.
Ecstatic. And I actually, I thought Natalia Reyes was good in the role, but I actually loved her the most when we see the future and we see her as this, fierce leader.
Badass.
Yes, badass, decisive leader. But you're right, Dave. That's a really good point that she is decisive throughout the film.
Yeah.
So it's not this. It's very different as considering as many references to Terminator and Terminator 2 and callbacks as there are. It is a nice change because Sarah Connor is so timid in Terminator, and she then has this complete 180 in T2. It's kind of nice to see that here's Danny who's decisive right from the start, and that's great. Although I'm sure Sarah Connor does teach her a lot about tactics and
guns they left it open for a sequel, of course.
Very much, of course.
I mean, and that's kind of the she displays all the leadership characteristics. It's just she's got the bravery. Even it's just she doesn't necessarily know how to use a gun per se.
Exactly.
And they have to teach her that, and you see her starting to learn that in the course of the movie. Is here's how I shoot a gun. I love the scene where they're doing the target practice, and they're trying to give her Arnold and Mackenzie Davis are trying to give her actual instructions. And Linda Hamilton just looks at her and goes, imagine a Terminator just came and killed your whole family, and then she just hits the targets because she's angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Sarah Connor knows what to tap into.
Yeah. That's one. I mean, if a 21st century James Cameron action movie can be, if a movie like this can be called subversive, it's relatively subversive. You got a Latina woman's going to save humanity. You've got all of the action heroes are women in this.
They've got to sneak their way into the U.S.
They got to sneak their way into the U.S., which is, it's kind of a, I mean, it's another one of those heavy-handed lines where Linda Hamilton's like, we're going to take an undocumented Mexican national into Texas.
Yeah,
you know,
and I want it in a few states.
And they're like, how many? She's like, 50. That was a great.
I did actually love that.
That was great how she just like threw that away. Just like
Right.
50.
Right?
You know?
Which was awesome. And, you know, and I have to say about the whole border detainment center thing, like I thought it was good that there was a moment where Mackenzie Davis is asking, one of the Border Patrol workers, she's like, where do you take the new prisoners? And she's like, no, they're not prisoners, they're detainees. And I was like, thank you.
Yeah. She's like, she doesn't care. She just smashes that lady's head against the wall.
It's like, no, they're prisoners. Like, go fuck yourself. Like,
this movie is very, its politics are right out there. There's no confusion. So,
right.
That is very true.
I kind of wonder how people who are super right wing, if they go to see
they're
this,
not going to like this
react.
one. Not going to like this one bit.
Hate it.
Yeah.
They're going to complain that Terminator has now been ruined by woke culture.
Yeah. Well, if you can't
That
make
is true.
comedies anymore because you can't call a character Dr. F, then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm still pissed off about that.
The Todd Phillips.
Yes.
Ditto. I mean, it's horrible and it's horseshit.
But we're talking about
Yes,
Terminator
but
Dark
let's
Fate.
talk about Terminator Dark Fate.
I dug the shit out of this movie.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean,
Despite it being heavy-handed,
Sure.
despite it being...
Well, James Cameron movies are always heavy-handed. And you can really see his fingerprints on this, even though he's only got a story credit and a producer credit.
I was going to say, this is the interesting thing. I just read an IndieWire article today that apparently the editing was a bloodbath, quote unquote, by James Cameron. So he took over the rough cut of the editing, even though he doesn't have an editing credit. And he reworked Tim Miller's film. And apparently Tim Miller and he did not get along. And Tim Miller was like, no, I want to make my film. And James Cameron's like, no, I know this world. We're going to make it this way. And I think the film, as much as I enjoyed it, and I did tremendously, and I liked it, I think it is very uneven. And I think it shows in the editing the uneven nature of it.
Even the action scenes are like some action scenes, like Evan described, or like you can't tell what the fuck is going on, and then other ones you're like, oh, it's very clear what's going on.
Yeah, it is super clear,
and the action is beautiful and really well orchestrated.
Or sometimes it's just totally insane, like when they're in the plane and the other plane crashes into it, and then they're crashing in the plane and flying around inside the cargo hold. That was just insane. It reminded me of Die Another Day, and it's just like the plane is crashing for like 30 minutes. You're like, how long does it take a plane to crash?
Well, and the thing of it is that if I hadn't seen how long indeed. If I hadn't seen the film and I was hearing you guys, describe that scene, I'd be like, that sounds fucking amazing.
Yeah, but then you see it.
You see it.
There are moments where it kind of is. There are moments where it kind of is, but it's
when you first realize they're weightless because of how the plane is plummeting to the earth. That's kind of cool. But then they lean on that too much. I thought.
But that's the problem. Like that's a great idea, but then they beat it to the ground.
Right, and it can just be like in a nosedive. It doesn't need to have like a hole in the side and like two engines gone. It's just like at a certain point you're like, okay, enough. Like you don't need that much insanity happening. It's crazy enough on its own. I feel like the idea of being in a plane where there's no pilot and it's crashing.
See, I didn't have a problem with the insanity. I actually liked that. I just didn't like the execution of it. It just looked like cluttered and it didn't look clear and it all looked kind of the same color palette. So that I had a problem with. More the execution and the style of it rather than I love the insanity. Bring it on.
I also had a problem with like the army major showing up and being like, here's your EMP.
Yeah, that was
How does Sarah Connor know that guy?
I don't know.
And also
they're gun club buddies or something. I don't know.
They just go into his base, and then he's like, I got this.
And everybody in the base is just helping them.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, they must respect the shit out of him as a commander because they're just literally helping them with everything. They're stalling the Terminator. They're letting them borrow a fucking plane, a cargo plane that is not coming back.
Well, that also reminds me, like, at no point in the film when someone is told, hey, there's a machine coming to kill me from the future, no one is like, you're fucking nuts. Like, nobody says that. It's just like, okay.
Yeah, there's no Dr. Silverman.
No, and I mean,
no. There was, though. There was the the Border Patrol agent who was like,
yes,
you gotta save that story to tell somebody else because that's fucking crazy.
And she's like, you're in danger. And she's like, no, I'm right here. I'm fine.
I'm in processing.
That's it. Thank you. Yeah, no, but I mean, I guess like Danny's uncle and like Danny and her brother.
Well, he did split the fly in half. Or Mackenzie Davis did, which I mean, it's one step above Mr. Miyagi, kind of shit. But
but if I saw somebody like Mr. Miyagi do that, I wouldn't be like, oh, okay, they're machines
there's a
from
robot
the future that are coming
to
kill me. So it just. Again, I mean, it's hard, obviously, not to compare to Terminator and T2, but I mean, I feel like there's a suspension of disbelief a little more palatable in both of those films than in this film.
Well, yeah, because even though, and that's one of the things I think that James Cameron, because this story was his baby, it still felt somewhat grounded. I mean, his original idea for the Terminator was actually
Lance Henriksen.
Lance Henriksen. He wanted somebody who could blend into the crowd, and that's why he found Terminator scary, is because it literally could be anybody, and you just don't know who it is, as opposed to Arnold, which was kind of what Arnold wanted. Is Arnold was originally supposed to play the Kyle Reese role, and then he was like, no, I want to be the bad guy, and that's how that all happened. Right. But
and I just got Michael Biehn. Oh god.
Yeah, but I just feel like he did
I like Michael Biehn.
It was a little bit more grounded, even when it was more fantastic.
Yes.
In this,
yes.
you've got more to suspend because it's just gotten crazier and crazier and crazier.
Right. And the thing of it is that I mean, if you've watched the others, you know that this is real, this is not fake. But the characters within this world don't necessarily know that, and so that always bothers me when kind of the quote unquote rules are not adhered to. Like, no one would actually just blindly believe that there are robots from space, not from space, from the future.
Well, I mean, unless you lived with him, like Arnold's family, his like adopted wife and son. It's like they could see the things that he would be a machine about. Like they could see the fact that he never sleeps or eats, or it's
but
like
when they question him about it, he's like, no, we don't have a physical relationship. She doesn't know I'm 400 pounds.
I think that I thought that was quite interesting. So one of the things we didn't talk about is the fact that, we see in 1998 in a flashback that John Connor, the computer-generated
Edward Furlong.
The computer-generated Edward Furlong is killed by another Terminator that comes, and then that Terminator just walks off. We don't see him again until later in the film.
That's a great scene.
And we find out that he found a wife and a surrogate family, and he, like the Terminator in T2, grew and learned and became a functioning... Almost human. And he understands what he did was wrong, and he understands why Linda Hamilton hates him, and it's just like accepted it. But he's like, but I'm still trying to do right by you now.
Yeah.
It's like you find out that he's the one who's been finding other Terminators and sending to her, which is why Linda Hamilton shows up in the first place, is she gets these like mysterious texts from somebody to show up, and that's how she ends up getting there to help.
The one thing I will say about, and which I just said, I love the scene where John dies, and not that he dies, I just thought it was well done. But the part of the thing that irked me about that scene, which is also the thing that irks me about why they need Arnold's help, is because Linda Hamilton's a badass, and she's caught off guard. Like it just in Mexico or wherever.
Yeah, Guatemala.
Yeah, that's it, Guatemala. And that just, I don't buy it. I just don't buy it. It just felt
that she'd be just sitting there. I don't
believe it.
Attention.
She would constantly be on guard. I just believe that 100%.
She would be sitting with her back to the bar,
correct.
Facing
she
out
would never
with
have
the gun.
her back to a room. She would never have her back to the beach. Never. So that bothered me. The other thing that bothered me is that Sarah Connor has been out hunting Terminators due to, as you said, Arnold's, cryptic texts. Why, if she's been hunting Terminator successfully, why do they need his help? I felt like I needed more.
I think I can answer that maybe.
Oh, please do.
Well, I mean, they get to the U.S., they've broken out of Border Patrol. They are wanted. They have no weapons. They don't have anywhere to go. They do have that stolen helicopter. But other than that, they got nothing. It's one thing to steal a helicopter. It's another thing to go into like an armory and steal all of the weapons, because that takes time.
Sure. No, but later on, and that I'm all fine with. That's not what I have a problem with. But later on in the film, when Sarah Connor is like pissed off at Arnold, obviously, because he killed John.
Mm-hmm.
Danny's like, no, we need him. We need him to kill this Terminator. We can't do it without him. And I'm like, what? Like, that's bullshit.
Well, maybe. I mean,
he
think...
brings the fact that he is a Terminator so he can take more physical abuse.
That's
I mean,
true.
like, the thing is with Mackenzie Davis's character in the film is that she's only, I think she says she's only really, wired or configured for short bursts of energy, which is why she needs this insulin cocktail periodically to kind of refuel. And so he's helpful in that he's not subject to those same limitations. He's ultimately still a machine, so he can take more abuse.
No. Very, very true. I'm just saying they could have done it without his help. That's all I'm saying.
Totally. Yeah, they're clever enough. They would have figured something out.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
He ends up helping and saving the day at the end anyway. He's kind of like the last death blow to it.
Yeah. And
It's a joint effort.
And I got choked up again.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
When he died?
I did.
Oh man, the thumbs up though. Nothing will rival that.
No, but that's why. Because it really, not because of the film itself, because it reminded me of T2.
I don't know. So do we have anything else we want to say about Terminator Dark Fate?
I do not, but
I love, I know I said this before and I know we talked about it extensively, but I just love having Linda Hamilton back. And I love that a Latina woman's going to save the world. It's the best.
Yeah.
I'm all aboard for that. I mean, I thought that it had a lot of slow spots, which is kind of a drag, but some of the action scenes, like that whole freeway chase that goes on forever, but in a good way.
Oh yeah,
that was super cool.
God,
that
I wanted
felt
more
straight
chases.
up like the motorcycle truck chase from T2.
Yeah. So, the action stuff was pretty good. The ending thing in the dam, is that the Hoover Dam? I mean,
it looks like the Hoover Dam.
But like, it's like, oh, now they've destroyed the dam, so all this water is going to come down and like, I guess destroy a bunch of civilization. I'm not sure.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Everybody will be okay.
But whatever. It's, it's definitely worth a see on the big screen.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Did you guys mind that there were so many callbacks to the other films?
I didn't mind them at all.
No, I really
Some people
didn't.
complain and say that they're intrusive. I didn't find them intrusive in the movie. I mean,
I found I'll be back and I won't be back bad.
Those were always the
I
most
agree.
intrusive lines, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and this one, I don't mind it being a little more tongue-in-cheek just because I feel like it's a little more, I don't know, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it's just a little bit more over the top than some of the other last couple of ones. So I didn't mind it being a little more goofy, a little more jovial.
The humor was in the right place in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, and Arnold bringing a lot of the humor. Well, Linda Hamilton too, but
they both did. Yeah.
how Arnold was when he had that line, he's like, "Plus, I'm funny." I was just like, "Oh, that's great."
Yeah.
So
for me, I died.
That was a great line.
For me, I died when you find out Carl, which is what the people call him now. He was doing drapes, and he's talking about how some guy wanted to ruin a room by putting the wrong drapes in
a little girl's room.
Yeah.
You don't do solid drapes. That was amazing.
Yeah, that was really funny. At first, I'm like, "What the fuck is he talking about?" I'm like, "Oh my god, he's talking about his job."
Yes, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know, I kind of wish we'd gotten a little more exploration. I think because T2 has this so much, I would have liked a little more exploration of the fact of just beyond a throwaway line of Sarah Connor saying, "I drink myself until I black out every single night." Like, I don't know, I guess I would have liked more about how she's been dealing with it beyond that, but maybe a throwaway line is all we need. I don't know.
That's all we're gonna get.
Fair enough. But yeah.
Cool.
But this was a fun one.
So TDF. Are we calling it TDF?
Woo,
Because you got
TDF.
Terminator, T2, TDF.
TDF, I like it.
Yeah.
I'm on board. CTDF.
Rock.
It sounds like I just told our listeners something really dirty.
CTDF, motherfuckers.
All right. This seems like a good time to sign off. It's getting a little weird here. So CTDF.
You can pass on Motherless Brooklyn.
Or pass on Motherless Brooklyn.
Either one. I don't
see
know.
Harriet.
Yeah, I would say see Harriet. Yes, I would say see Harriet.
Cool. Okay. Well, then that wraps things up. If you want to track down the show, you can get us anywhere you can get podcasts, but you can also find us at our website. We're spoilerpiece.com. You can get in touch with us on social media. We're at spoilerpiece on both Twitter and Instagram. We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. And you can reach out to us. You can send us an email, spoilerpiece@gmail.com, and you can give us a call
862-21-PEACE.
Leave us a message. Tell us we're right. Tell us we're wrong. Or just, I don't know, call us and say hi.
Hi.
Hi. And, but we'll actually say hi to your message. If you really like the show, tell a friend, or rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. That please, that's really helpful for people to find the show. And also, if you really, really like us, and you've got some extra money burning a hole in your wallet, go to patreon.com/spoilerpiece. Sign up for our Patreon. Each week we do exclusive audio. This week's exclusive audio, we discuss the Alfred Hitchcock film Vertigo. We won't tell you anything about how we feel about it. You'll just have to tune into that.
Except that it's actually pronounced Vertigo, which is really strange.
Yeah, that sounds like a weird...
like impetigo?
Yeah, it sounds like a skin medication. With a lot of side effects.
You apply Vertigo 3 times a day after meals.
Please talk to your doctor about using Vertigo. Do not use Vertigo if you're nursing or pregnant, or may consider being pregnant. Anyway, sign up for Patreon. You get exclusive audio. You can also vote in our poll. We are going to have a new one coming up. You can pick movies for us to see. So there's lots of good stuff there. And obviously we're going to work on some more stuff too. So my name is Evan Crean. I am editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BOFCA and co-author of your 80s movie guide to better living. And you can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
My name is Dave Riedel. I write for Salt Lake City Weekly and Orlando Weekly. You can find me on Letterboxd, Twitter, and Instagram as Dave Sees Movies.
And I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer, editor of Bitchflix, and a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. And you can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld.
And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.